Peter Charles and welcome to my video, Untying the Dirty Harry Fly. This fly has a bit of a story attached to it. It started out in about 2001 where I was trying to develop a fly that would show well in very, very murky conditions. So I also had a brand new rod at the time, so that fall I gathered the rod, the reel, the Dirty Harry and ran down to the Credit River to give it a go. Well, when I got there I found that the parking lot was rapidly emptying as all the centerpin guys were coming off the river in droves. I talked to a couple of them and they said the river's chocolate milk. I mean, it's mud. I mean, there's no visibility. It's useless. Nobody's catching anything. So I figured, I might as well go anyway because I had a brand new rod and I was just dying to get it wet, and a new fly, and I didn't care whether it was mud. So I went down to the pool and I knew where there were a few boulders even though I couldn't see them. So I swung the fly across a few boulders and with, 5 or 10 casts, I had a beautiful bright chrome hen. Just came right out of the water, hooked well, and it's quite a tussle. So it showed that the fly could actually catch fish in brutal conditions. I mean, you couldn't see more than a couple of inches in that water, yet the fish could find the fly. Since then it has done the same. In many occasions I've pulled up fish out of some pretty murky, muddy looking water. Stuff that most people would go home rather than try and fish. So yeah, this thing works. And it's also caught fish under better visibility as well. I mean, just anytime you want to throw purple and black, I mean, how can you go wrong with purple and black with steelhead fishing? Anyway, here's the fly. Not much to it. It's mostly a Marabou wet fly. We have a yarn body underneath, a big silver tag, some crystal flash, some bucktail, and two turns of Marabou, one of purple and one of black. Now I want to show these Marabou feathers right off the bat. Okay, here's these Marabou feathers. I just want to show you what they look like. The black, it's smaller than the purple, and that's deliberate. The black is a very dominant color, so I don't want too much black on this. I want the purple to show, and the purple goes behind the black. So I always make the black a little bit smaller than the purple feather. For thread, I'm using UTC 140 in a nice deep red. For my yarn body, I'm using Uni Yarn regular 2X in purple. My rib is a Uni French oval large in silver, and my tag is Uni Mylar size 10 in gold silver, and we use it silver side up. The hook I'm using today is a Kamasan B190 deep water salmon single in a size 1/0 or size 2/0. Today I'm using the 2/0 hook because I want a little bit more size to this fly, but 1/0 will work just as well. You have some options here with hooks. Not everybody wants to use a heavy gauge hook like this. A lot of people like fine wire hooks, and that's fine. If you prefer a fine wire hook, it's not going to have the weight to pull this thing down. So I'd recommend a few wraps of lead under the body if you're going to go with a light wire hook. I'm using this heavy wire hook to drag this thing down. I mean, it's got to get down in heavy flows. And that Marabou wants to keep it up. I mean, the Marabou really puffs out in heavy flows. So it has a lot of drag. That'll make it right up. So the alternative is to use some weight to get down. And in my case, I'm using this heavy water salmon hook to get down. The other alternative, of course, you could add a little bit of lead eyes to the front of it. There's a number of things you could do. A cone head, a bunch of things. But I prefer just the heavy wire salmon hook. It's just cleaner and neater. The last thing I want to talk about on this fly is the large head. That's not an accident. A lot of people like little heads on their flies and they look very nice, and I do that too sometimes. But this fly, the head is large for a reason. It has hydrodynamic properties that cause the water to flow around the fly and bulge out. And when this thing comes through the water, these materials will be puffed right out. I mean, this fly looks like it's about 1/2 inch across when it comes through the water. So it's really, really bulky in profile. And that's what you want in a murky water fly. You want that bulky profile that the fish can see. But that large head does that job of creating a flow around, and you get these flow lines going around that really puff up the material. Sometimes I've added a dubbing ball right in behind here, and that dubbing ball will also cause the material to flare up. I'll use Seal, SLF, mohair, a variety of dubbing materials, just purple dubbing, and throw it in behind there and away it goes. That might be more useful in heavier flows where the marabou might be pushed back. In my local river, the flows aren't that heavy, so I can get away with no dubbing ball. But keep that in mind if you're fishing a river with some really fast flows. Okay, let's get on to tying this fly. I'm going to start my thread just in front of the point. A few turns to hold it. Now the tag is made out of mylar. It's gold on one side, silver on the other. So we want the silver to show, so I tied in gold side up. And the reason why I do that is when I turn this over to start wrapping, it will flip over to silver. And I want a good sized tag here. So I'm using touching turns so I get a nice flat surface onto which to wrap my tag. Now, something I'll mention here that's a little different from what a lot of other people do. You'll notice that I've wrapped over and then I'm going to bring my mylar back. You'll see a lot of other tyers, especially those that tie very elegant spay flies, will use the down and back routine. So they'll start their mylar, they'll go down, and they'll bring their mylar back rather than wrap thread over it. And that gives you a very, very nice looking tag, and that's it's a very nice way to tie. Unfortunately, with this particular fly, I've had too many come apart when a fish has hit it and just rip that mylar up, and it just falls apart. I got fed up with that, so now I wrap the thread over it and then wrap my mylar back and it stays in place. The other alternative you could do is you could put a fine rib over that mylar. That's always an alternative, but I prefer to use this method. Okay, now we just come back in touching turns, making sure not to show any red underneath. Don't be afraid to maneuver it into position if the first wrap isn't right. A couple of securing wraps. Now what I'm going to do here is trim this off to the length of the return. Some things I like to do on a fly that's tied on a salmon hook with the return eye is to fill the space with some of the tag ends of the material, so we just don't have this big step at this point. The next piece I'm going to tie in is our rib. Just come round. I can just pull this into position. There we go. A couple of wraps to hold it. Just put that in the material keeper. Then we tie in our purple yarn. Again, just pull it into position. And a couple of wraps to hold it. Now I'm just going to clean this up. Just keep this all on the side of the hook to fill in that space. And up over the return. Whoops. Too carried away there, Charles. Just wrap back to smooth that up. Now it's an important part here to leave enough room in this head to get all that marabou tied in. We don't want to crowd the eye of the hook and then we'll have no room for a marabou. So that's an important point, leave some space here. A couple of half hitches. I'll make 3 passes with the yarn. I'll make a nice cigar-shaped body with tapered ends. It's especially important to have the front end tapered. I don't want a big step in the front because that'll cause the wing to kick up. Now when I tie in my purple body, I'll do it in 3 layers and I will taper it so it looks like more of a cigar shape. We have nice tapered ends to the body, and I'll do that by controlling the tension on the yarn. I'll start tight and lead it, and then I'll slack off and follow. I'll start to lead again with tension. Now you'll notice I used a wrap forward then a wrap back to lock in place. I do this with all my material. It adds bulk, it's not as pretty, but you're less likely to have the fly come apart when you do that. Okay, the next step is to put in our rib. We'll counterwind this rib so it doesn't dig into the purple yarn body and disappear. Now's the time for our Marabou. We're going to tie it in by the tip and then fold the fibers back as we wrap it on. So a few wraps forward, grab the tip, fold it back, lock it in place. A couple of half hitches to hold everything. I'll use my hackle pliers here. Now the tip of the Marabou quill is very, very fragile. It's very easy to break off at this stage, so I usually put in a wrap first before I start to fold my fibers back. It just avoids breaking the tip. It happens to everybody. We all break a few of these. I don't care how many times you've tied these flies, you'll always break a few. Now we'll fold some fibers back. That's not a problem. We'll pick those out afterwards. Some of them will get trapped. It's inevitable. Don't worry about it at this stage. We'll deal with it afterwards. Okay, a few wraps to lock that in place. Fold it back over. A few wraps. Hold tight and pop it off. That pop-off method works best with fine quills, and it's a good method to use because it avoids having a piece of the quill sticking up that you now have to wrap thread over to cover. So at this stage, I'm just going to take my bodkin and pick out carefully some of those trapped fibers. There we go. I'll just pull this back, put a couple more wraps in there. Now you notice how much space I've got in here. You'll see how I'll be using that in a few minutes. Now again, we tie in our black by the tip, as we did with purple. A couple of wraps, fold over, lock in place. And you notice I'm not bothering to cut the tip off. I just leave it there, it just adds a little bit more Marabou for me to work with. No real need to clip it off. It's underneath, it doesn't show. Just adds a bit more Marabou to the fly. Okay, again, being very careful not to break this. Folding the barbs back as we go. Fold over, wrap over, break off. Now it looks like that one didn't break, it pulled out of the hackle pliers instead. There we go. Now fold those fibers over, wrap back. I'll get my bodkin out and I'll just go through this and pick out any fibers that may be trapped. Don't yank on it hard, you'll break them. That looks pretty good. Let's clean this up. You see, I'm not worried about creating bulk here. Bulk is my friend and not my enemy. Okay, I'm going to get my purple crystal flash going here. Use at least 6 strands. This is a dirty water fly, so we wanted to show, so don't be bashful with it. 6, 7, 8 strands. Lots of flash. Come around the back, come over the top. I got a bit of a stray in there, so I'll pick that out. Now you notice I'm holding it at an angle. I'll put a couple of wraps in there. I'll flip this back, hold it at an angle. I've tied it in sort of a V shape so it lies on either side of the bucktail wing that I'm going to put on next. So as you can see here, we have a bit of a V going on here with the way the crystal flash fits on either side of the body. Okay, now it's time for our bucktail. Now something you should know about using bucktail. The hairs at the base of the tail are hollow, and if you tie them on with a tight wrap, they'll just flare. But the hair at the tip is more solid, and it's better for winging material because you can tie it on and it won't flare out. You won't get this big spiky look to it. So we're going to use hair from the tip. Now when using bucktail, these fibers at the base are full of short hairs, and they will stiffen up our wing and make it very bulky to tie in. So the first thing I do is I grab this clump by the tip and stroke all this stuff off into the garbage can. I get rid of all those short fibers, and now you can see that it's quite a bit more sparse than it was before. Now we're going to tie the wing on top, and we'll make it about the same length as a crystal flash. You notice this wing is fairly sparse, so we'll make a couple of gentle wraps, and then we'll check our position. Don't be afraid to move it. Then we'll come in here and clip it off. Be careful not to clip your thread. Now we'll finish off the fly just by expanding our head slightly, making it smoother, a nice conical shape, and then we'll put on some head cement. Now the whip finish. And apply our head cement. Okay, there's the Dirty Harry. So, the next time you go fishing and the river looks like chocolate milk, don't give up. Pull this fly out. Put on a nice solid sinking head or a full sink line. Get it down there, get it down in around the stones, and hang on, because the fish are still there. They haven't gone anywhere. In fact, in these heavier flows, they might be likely to sit still and rest longer. So don't be afraid to fish low and slow in those flows. And give this fly a try. Enjoy.